He didn't even look up when I knocked. Just waved one manicured hand like I was some damn Olive Garden waiter delivering breadsticks. That's how I knew the air had shifted. 15 years of making this place run smoother than a greased weasel in a slip-and slide. And suddenly, I'm background noise to a man who still says synergy unironically. The name's Monica Fletcher. I've been the ops backbone of Dunning and Pike since Bush was president, the first one. I've weathered 3 CEOs, 2 market crashes, 1 fire drill that turned into a lawsuit, and enough catered lunches to raise my cholesterol just by memory. I'm not flashy, I'm not loud, but if you wanted flights booked, contracts negotiated, or a $10 million client coddled like a newborn on Benadryl, you called me. And until Chase Donnelly, they did call me. Chase floated into our lives like a cologne-slicked fever dream. Younger than my printer, all smiles and sound bites, the kind of man who'd fire your whole department, then Instagram a photo captioned growth mindset. He had teeth too white to trust and a handshake like a damp sock. The board drooled over him, said he had vision. All I saw was a man trying to build a legacy on other people's blueprints. Now look, I'm not one to interrupt your scrolling, but if this story's got you already gripping your mug like it's a stress ball, do me a solid. Tap that like button, maybe even subscribe. 97% of folks just listen and vanish into the void like unpaid interns. It takes you 1 click and helps our team more than you know. All right, back to the wreckage. Things didn't implode all at once. It was a slow drip, like a leaky faucet that eventually floods your whole damn kitchen. My meeting invites started disappearing from calendars. Weekly reports I used to approve were suddenly reviewed by Chase's team. Projects I'd built from scratch, gone, reassigned to shiny new hires who couldn't tell a vendor contract from a vending machine manual. I confronted him once, gently, asked if we needed to sync up on shifting responsibilities. He smiled like I'd offered him a participation trophy. "Oh, Monica," he said, fake chuckle loaded like buckshot. "You've done great things. We're moving into a new phase now. Agile, streamlined, bold." That's when it clicked. I wasn't being included in the new direction. I was the old direction. 15 years of loyalty, of smoothing egos and fixing messes before they became headlines, now being politely euthanized by a man who still called women gals during HR briefings. I started keeping notes. Every snub, every reassignment, every time he forgot to loop me in. Not because I was bitter. Don't do messy breakdowns in the bathroom like the marketing girls. No, I do spreadsheets. I do long games. And something about Chase's smirking condescension made the back of my neck itch like the air before a thunderstorm. Then came the calendar invite, quarterly board review attendance mandatory. No agenda, no context. And my badge, my all-access, top-level badge, suddenly didn't work on my floor. I had to be escorted by one of Chase's smug interns. Didn't even make eye contact. That's when I knew. They were about to try and bury me. But I wasn't digging my own grave, they were. And they had no damn clue the land they picked was already rigged with dynamite. The boardroom was ice cold, like someone had cranked the thermostat down to match Chase's soul. The glass walls were spotless, the kind of sterile clean that screams, "We just fired someone in here." I walked in behind the intern, Kenzie or McKenna or some other overpriced vowel salad, and felt every pair of eyes snap to me like a firing squad lining up their shot. Chase was already seated at the head of the table, legs crossed like a smug yoga cultist, sipping sparkling water and smirking like this was his big Broadway debut. "Ah, Monica," he said, like my name was a punchline. "Glad you could join us." There was no chair for me, no folder, no slide deck, just a manila envelope in front of Chase, thick with self-satisfaction. He stood up slowly, like he was savoring the buildup, looked around the room, nodded solemnly, as if what he was about to do was noble, even necessary. Then he reached into the envelope, pulled out a printed copy of my employment contract, the one I signed 15 years ago when this company was still using fax machines and begging clients with bagels. Without breaking eye contact, he shredded it. Not with a machine, with his hands. Tore it down the middle like he was Moses splitting the Red Sea of my career. Paper fluttered to the floor like confetti at a funeral. "We appreciate your loyalty, Monica," he said, projecting like he was on stage. "But this company is entering a new era. We need warriors, not secretaries clinging to legacy systems." No one laughed. A few board members looked uncomfortable and even shifted like he might say something, but didn't. Cowards, the lot of them. People I'd coached through divorces, rehab relapses, panic attacks before IPO launches. People who owed me everything. He continued, "You're being offered a very generous severance package," he said, sliding a folder toward where a chair should have been. "Of course, standard NDA terms apply. We'd appreciate your cooperation in ensuring a smooth transition." And I'd advise against. "Theatrics, let's keep this professional. Professional." This from the man who just shredded a contract like he was in a high school drama club. My hands didn't shake. My breath didn't hitch. I just stared at the pieces of paper on the floor as if they meant something. They didn't, because Chase Donnelly had just shredded the wrong damn thing. See, what he didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that the contract in his hand was theater. The real play, 8 years old, and in a clause buried so deep in a merger filing that not even legal remembered it existed. They just fired the one person with exclusive contractual power over our largest international account. I picked up the severance folder like I was handling radioactive waste. Didn't open it, didn't say a word, just looked at Chase, right in those bleached predator teeth, and gave him a nod that said, "Checkmate's coming, sweetheart." He didn't flinch. Didn't need to. His downfall was already printed, time-stamped, notarized, and sitting in my lawyer's desk drawer, waiting for a single text. I turned and walked out, past the board, past the windows, past the intern who couldn't meet my eye. And when I hit the elevator, I pulled out my phone and typed exactly 6 words. Activate clause 12.4. It's time. The elevator doors shut behind me like a vault sealing a crime scene. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Didn't even blink. I just stood there, watching the floor numbers descend like a countdown to detonation. When I hit the ground floor, I texted my lawyer the 6 words we'd agreed on years ago, back when I was smart enough to know that in business, trust isn't a safety net. It's a trap. Activate clause 12.4. It's time. Then I turned off my phone and walked out into the sunlight like it was any other Thursday, because for me, it was. For them, it was the beginning of the end. 8 years earlier, we acquired a struggling international logistics firm. Dull as it sounds, that deal was the hinge that swung open a whole new market for us. European clients, import-export portfolios, compliance mazes most execs here couldn't navigate without a Sherpa. And who do you think made it happen? The lawyers drafted the deal, sure. But I built the trust. I soothed egos in 3 languages, flew coach to Stuttgart during a snowstorm, and once spent 4 hours in a German customs office negotiating the release of a mislabeled crate full of prototype biotech scanners. Long story. Weird dog was involved. Point is, I got it done. And when I did, I tucked a little clause into the contract addendum, a clause so unassuming it might as well have been a footnote. But it wasn't. It was a grenade. Clause 12.4. In the event that Monica Fletcher is involuntarily terminated without cause, she retains exclusive authority to reassign or assume direct management of all client contracts sourced during or as a result of the merger. Legal had no reason to flag it. It was buried beneath 214 pages of corporate sludge. The CEO at the time, Greg something, I think he had a heart murmur and a pet lizard. He skimmed it and signed, "No fuss," and then everyone forgot, except me, because I don't forget, I prepare. Every time a new executive came sniffing around, every time my contributions were restructured or streamlined, I opened that clause like a rosary. Because when people show you their ambition, you believe them. When they show you their fangs, you show them your paperwork. I sat at a cafe that afternoon, watching pigeons fight over a French fry, sipping a cappuccino, smiling for the first time in weeks. Across town, my lawyer was already in motion. He wasn't a loud man, just thorough, punctual, and mildly terrifying. The kind of lawyer who uses phrases like irrevocable fiduciary entitlements and sends documents in leather folders like they're bound grimoires. By the time the firm's leadership was back in their offices, licking their ego wounds and high-fiving over the decisive transition, legal cogs were already grinding into place. First, the notice of termination was reviewed against the clause. Then, the clause was compared to current contract controls. Then, the client's contract, our most lucrative account, mind you, the one responsible for nearly 38% of annual revenue, was flagged as eligible for reassignment. All it needed was my signature. And the client's consent. Spoiler alert, they adored me, because unlike Chase and his swarm of glassy-eyed yes-men, I remembered birthdays. I solved problems at 2 a.m. without needing a Zoom call. I saved them a fortune when their freight got stuck in Rotterdam last year. I once smuggled a diabetic exec a box of insulin pens after customs flagged his carry-on. I was the relationship, and now I was free, not fired, freed. That evening, I pulled the old contract from my home file cabinet. The original, yellowed at the corners, smelled like toner and vindication. I ran my fingers over the embossed notary seal, everything they built on top of my foundation. I could shake it loose with one clause and a client's signature. Let Chase have his moment. Let him soak in the applause from the board, thinking he'd conquered the old guard. He hadn't fired a secretary. He'd pissed off the architect in a law office that looked more like a gentleman's smoking club than anything involving subpoenas. Dark wood, whiskey decanters, shelves lined with books no one's opened since Nixon resigned. I brought the contract in a Ziploc bag like it was evidence in a homicide, and in a way it was. Murder weapon, arrogance. Victim, Chase Donnelly's career. My lawyer, David Rothman, didn't speak for the first 2 minutes. Just flipped through the clause like he was reading scripture. His eyebrows didn't move. That's how I knew we were good. You ready to end this? He asked without looking up. I was ready 8 years ago, I said, and so it began. Step 1 was legal notification, invoking Clause 12.4. That meant alerting the compliance team of the European conglomerate, Van der Straeten Holdings, that effective immediately, the existing client management contract was subject to reassignment. Chase wouldn't be notified until they replied. Step 2 was the trust test. Would they follow me? Let's rewind a second. Van der Straeten wasn't just a client, they were the client. Think 8-figure accounts, quarterly renewals the size of most firms' annual budgets, and enough logistical spaghetti to make Homeland Security nervous. For 5 years, they never once spoke to anyone else at Dunning and Pike. Not legal, not billing, not even Chase's precious strategy team. Me, always me. That kind of trust doesn't get built on PowerPoints. It gets built in Frankfurt hotel lobbies at 3 a.m. with bad espresso and worse news about customs delays. It gets built when you personally overnight a CEO's lost passport and book his nanny a separate flight. I'd carried them through crisis after crisis, never asked for applause. They owed me nothing, but I knew they'd follow. When I finally spoke to Jan Willem, their executive director of operations, he didn't even let me finish before interrupting. They terminated you? He asked, sounding more offended than I felt. Without warning, without cause, I said, but it's handled. Clause 12.4 is in motion. I just need a signature. There was a pause, not long, maybe 3 seconds, and then send it. We'll be happy to continue working with you. Just like that, the balance tipped. Signed, my lawyer filed. The client's legal department acknowledged receipt. The contracts, their contracts, were now under my independent management, all before Chase even knew what he'd done. Meanwhile, in the ivory tower of Dunning and Pike, Chase was strutting through the halls like a prom king headed to his coronation. He'd been telling everyone loudly that he was about to lock in the Van der Straeten account for the next 5 years. Even had one of the junior partners working on a flashy pitch deck full of buzzwords like disruptive leverage and cross-market agility. The renewal pitch was scheduled for the following Monday. I circled the date on my calendar and wrote one word beneath it, extinction. But until then, silence. I didn't gloat. I didn't post cryptic LinkedIn rants. I didn't even call the junior staffers who'd messaged me with WTF just happened. After the firing, was busy rerouting account access, busy severing internal API ties to VD Esticas private portal, busy opening a small LLC with a clean name, no connection to Dunning and Pike, and a single purpose, managing this account directly. By Friday, I had a legal framework, a client transition plan, and a bottle of scotch with Chase's name on it, figuratively speaking. I don't drink, but sometimes revenge smells like oak and old paper. Only loose thread? Chase still thinking he was king of a castle that no longer had a foundation. He had his best suit pressed, his hair trimmed, his calendar blocked out for that all-important pitch. I didn't warn him, didn't need to. Let him walk into that meeting thinking he was the hammer. He was about to learn he was the nail. The following week began with the kind of manufactured optimism only clueless executives can muster. Fake smiles, loud hallway banter, someone in marketing trying to get everyone to vote on new slide deck color schemes, like the house wasn't already on fire. Chase strutted through the office Monday morning like a man headed to a coronation. Fresh suit, Bluetooth in one ear, bragging to anyone within range that Van der Straeten was as good as signed. Said it twice to the same receptionist like she was a parrot. Imagined he had his victory post drafted for LinkedIn already. Something insufferable about transformational synergy and a bold new chapter. But as he marched into the war room to rehearse his pitch, the silence from Vander Straighten was already strangling the edges of his narrative. They hadn't confirmed the final meeting time. In fact, they'd asked, politely, to reschedule. Twice. Schedule conflict, their assistant wrote in the last email. Team needs more time to review structural changes. No explanation, no tone, just corporate beige. Chase thought it was a negotiation tactic, said so in the prep meeting. Typical Europlay, he chuckled. They love the drama. He had no idea the drama wasn't coming from across the Atlantic. It was coming from inside his own building. Behind the scenes, the firm's legal and compliance teams were starting to fidget. One of the paralegals had flagged something in the client's CRM, a permissions shift. Access to the Vander Straighten contract folder had quietly disappeared from the shared system. No one could find the latest draft. Someone blamed IT. Someone else blamed the new document management platform. Everyone avoided saying the obvious. The client had ghosted them. At this point, I hadn't responded to a single email. Not one call, not one friendly reach out from old colleagues trying to play both sides. I kept my presence minimal and clinical. Quiet moves, sharp impact. But then I got a message from Noah, junior analyst, smart, quiet, probably the only one in the building who ever remembered to ask if I'd eaten lunch. He used to bring me post-it notes with terrible jokes on them during budget season just to see me roll my eyes. His message was short. Monica, heads up. Board's starting to panic. They think something's off, but Chase won't listen. He says you're bluffing. Just be careful. I smiled at the screen, not because I needed the warning, because the timing was perfect. Bluffing? There's a difference between a bluff and a checkmate you don't see coming because you were too busy admiring your own reflection in the conference room glass. Letting them squirm was intentional. Every hour that passed without confirmation from Vander Straighten, internal anxiety rose. Executives started double-booking meetings, just in case. The head of partnerships made an offhand joke about Plan B and was promptly told to shut up. Rumors were flaring. Did Monica poach the client? Did she sign something before leaving? Did she know something? Chase wasn't concerned. Or at least, he acted like he wasn't. People like Monica always throw a tantrum on their way out, he said, according to the intern who accidentally forwarded a Slack message to one of my old vendors. She'll land at some boutique firm and flame out by Q4. Let's not waste oxygen. That boutique firm, it already existed, registered under my maiden name, fully operational, one client, one purpose, and flaming out. Let's just say the only thing on fire was the bridge behind him. Still, I let the string play out. One more calendar reschedule, one more vague email from Vander Straighten. One more day of silence while they spun in circles trying to fix a leak they didn't even know was underwater. I wasn't doing this for revenge. This was ritual, a cleansing. 15 years of swallowing broken systems and sugar-coated insults, of keeping the lights on while men like Chase ran around rewiring fuses with duct tape and confidence. Now I had power. And for the first time in a long time, I felt it, not as rage, but as relief. Cold, clean, controlled. He thought he'd buried me, but all he did was dig a grave and jump in first. The email hit the CFO's inbox at exactly 9:03 a.m. Subject line, formal reassignment notification, clause 12.4 activation attachments, 4 PDFs, tone, surgical. The first PDF outlined the clause. The second documented Monica Fletcher's termination, time-stamped and signed. Third, Vander Straighten Holdings confirmation of reassignment. The fourth, a contract, clean, final, already executed, naming Monica's new firm as the exclusive account manager. No warning, no wiggle room, just a scalpel through the firm's jugular. By 9:08, the CFO had stumbled into the boardroom pale as printer paper. By 9:12, 2 directors were on speakerphone with legal, one muttering something about irreparable exposure. By 9:20, Chase Donnelly finally checked his phone and realized he wasn't walking into a pitch. He was walking into a funeral. I was already 2 steps ahead, sitting in my lawyer's office, sipping peppermint tea like I didn't just pull off the cleanest decapitation in Dunning and Pike's history. David, my lawyer, was thumbing through a hard copy of the signed transition paperwork, nodding occasionally like a priest, reading someone's last rites. Chase called me at 9:27. The call rang once, then twice. I let it go to voicemail, let him sweat, let him feel the silence stretch like a noose. Then he texted, "Monica, let's talk. I didn't realize the full picture. I think we got off on the wrong foot. I'm open to revisiting things." Let's explore new opportunities, maybe even your own division. You've always been a key player. I read it once. Then handed the phone to David. He didn't even blink. As typed back, Mr. Donnelly, all communications regarding this matter must now go through counsel. Please direct future inquiries to our office. Then he silenced the phone. Back at the firm, the dam cracked wide open. 40% of annual revenue gone. Vander Straten had pulled everything: logistics contracts, consulting agreements, back-end data access. Access codes were revoked. The internal client dashboard now read: account terminated per reassignment. Slack channels, panic became policy. One exec accidentally pasted what the actual FK is this into the company-wide announcements thread. Someone else tried to delete it. Too late. Investors were already pinging. Why wasn't this flagged? Why wasn't Monica retained? What is Clause 12.4? The board, previously starstruck by Chase's swagger, now looked at him like he'd pissed in the company's punch bowl. Questions flew. Who reviewed the merger documents? Why wasn't there a retention clause? How did she walk out with the account? Chase kept trying to spin. We're exploring strategic alternatives, he stammered in a hastily assembled town hall. This is a temporary setback, but his hands were shaking. His shirt was a little too damp, and nobody believed a word he said, because this wasn't temporary. This was severance with precision. Behind the scenes, I had already hired 2 former colleagues, since the firm had foolishly laid off last quarter, to help onboard the account to my firm. They were thrilled, said it felt like a jailbreak. I wasn't gloating, not really, but I was satisfied. Because in the span of a week, Chase had gone from smug puppet master to panic damage control monkey. His empire, built on charisma and assumptions. Mine, built on fine print and patience. And now, the only communication he'd get from me came in 12-point font, wrapped in legalese, signed, sealed, and hand-delivered with a smile that said, "You should have read the damn contract." By Thursday morning, the panic wasn't just inside the boardroom. It had spread like mildew through the walls of Dunning and Pike. What started as whispered questions turned into open rebellion. Slack channels lit up like Christmas. Words like bonus freeze, client implosion, and potential restructuring leaked into every conversation, no matter how many HR emails tried to plug the holes. People weren't stupid. They knew something massive had broken, and not in a glitch in the CRM kind of way. This was a structural failure. Something below the surface had snapped, and now the building was leaning, creaking, waiting to fall. The whispers turned into resumes, quiet exits, networking coffees. By noon, 3 mid-level managers had already reached out to me. One email simply read, "If you're hiring, I'm ready to jump, and I'll bring 3 clients with me." Another, from a marketing director I barely knew, attached a PDF resume and said, "Honestly, I just want to work somewhere that respects competency again." And then there were the messages from the junior staff, the ones who used to hang back after meetings to ask real questions. The ones I mentored, coached, protected from the worst of the firm's ego circus. They were scared, angry, exhausted. So was I. My exhaustion came with peace now. I'd done my part. I'd pulled the lever. The avalanche was theirs to manage and chase. He handled it exactly like you'd expect from a man who thought charisma was a business plan. He found a scapegoat. Noah, the junior analyst who warned me, fired. No warning, no exit interview. His keycard deactivated mid-coffee run. He posted about it vaguely on LinkedIn that afternoon. After 2 years at D&P, I'm unexpectedly seeking new opportunities. Grateful for what I learned, especially what not to become. Chase, meanwhile, was melting down behind closed doors, according to the texts I kept getting from inside. Screaming matches with compliance, blaming IT for permissions leaks, accusing legal of burying clauses. He even claimed someone had sabotaged the CRM system by removing contract visibility. That was rich, and couldn't spot sabotage if it wore a name tag and brought donuts. The board wasn't buying his excuses either. They were quietly meeting in smaller groups now. No more collective confidence, just fragmented loyalty and frantic calculations. Can we survive this? Can he survive this? Should we call someone else in? I imagined Chase could feel it, that slow isolation of a leader outlived by their own delusions. But I wasn't there to see it. I was on my porch, wearing the hoodie my niece bought me last Christmas. Ask me about logistics, I dare you. And drinking lemon ginger tea while my phone vibrated like a slot machine. LinkedIn messages. Recruiters. Alumni I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly just checking in. A venture capital firm sent a feeler email asking if I'd be open to advisory opportunities. Apparently news traveled fast when 40% of your revenue vanished with a notarized whisper. I didn't gloat. I didn't respond. Not yet. I just watched it unfold like slow-motion justice. No screaming, no scandal. Just the consequences of arrogance landing exactly where they were supposed to. For 15 years, I'd cleaned up other people's messes. Now, for the first time, I was simply letting one happen. And it was beautiful. The email came in on a Sunday night, subject line. Emergency board meeting stakeholder advisory presence requested. Tried to dress it up like I was being honored with a seat at the grown-up table. Like I should be flattered. What they meant was, we're bleeding out and need to know how deep the knife went. The meeting was set for Monday morning at 8:30 sharp. Boardroom 6A. Formal attire preferred. Attached was a new NDAs and a note requesting I limit commentary to contractual clarification and post-termination transition cooperation. I forwarded it to David with one line, "You coming?" He replied in under a minute, "Wouldn't miss it for the world." We arrived early. I wore slate gray, sharp, clean, not a thread out of place. No flashy jewelry, no dramatic lipstick. Just enough presence to make them uncomfortable, not enough to let them accuse me of gloating. I looked like what they'd always claimed to want, a professional. David came in right behind me, briefcase in hand, dressed like every corporate villain Chase had ever underestimated. We walked in to find the board already seated, half of them pretending to read notes, the other half pretending not to watch me. And then there was Chase. He looked like he hadn't slept, tie crooked, under-eye bags like suitcases, that perfect CEO hair drooping just enough to betray the unraveling. He tried to smile. Failed. "Monica," he said with a brittle voice. "Thanks for coming. I'm glad we can clear some things up." I didn't sit yet. Neither did David. Chase stood and immediately launched into a monologue clearly written in a mirror that morning. There have been irregularities, serious ones. A sudden reassignment of our most vital client. Legal exposure we were not adequately prepared for. Frankly, actions taken without full transparency. The clause in question, if it exists, is being examined for potential breach and intent to undermine firm stability. His voice cracked on stability. He glanced at the board for support. Found none. Then he looked at me, still standing, still silent. That's when David stepped forward, popped open his briefcase with that satisfying click, and placed a leather folder on the table. He opened it slowly, deliberately, then slid a single document across the polished wood. No theatrics, no speech. Just one paper, face up, top page marked with a neon yellow highlighter and a red notary seal. Clause 12.4. Timestamped. Executed. Initialed on every page by the firm's old CEO, Monica Fletcher, and the representative of Vander Straighten Holdings. Legal validation from 8 years ago. Binding. Irrevocable. Chase reached for it, but David stopped him cold with a look that said, "Touch it, and I will bury you under it." Chase just stared. The board went dead quiet. One of the directors, a silver-haired man who once told me I was the glue that keeps the place from eating itself alive, leaned in and muttered, "You never read the merger files, did you?" Chase didn't answer. The silence thickened until someone cleared their throat and asked softly, "Is this enforceable?" David smiled. "It's not only enforceable, it's already been enforced." Another board member blinked hard. The client confirmed. Nodded once, "They signed last week." Chase tried to recover. "This was intentional. You orchestrated this. You planned this," David cut in. She protected herself. The clause was legal. The termination was yours. The consequences, also yours. I sat down. Calm, straight-backed, hands folded. Chase, meanwhile, looked like a man who just realized the lifeboats were fake. Because this wasn't the peak of the fall. It was just the pause before the impact. One of the directors cleared his throat and began to read, slow and steady, like reciting a eulogy. Clause 12.4. In the event that Monica Fletcher is involuntarily terminated without cause, she shall retain full authority to reassign or assume direct management of all client accounts sourced during or resulting from the acquisition of Verstag Logistics. This clause is non-transferable, non-revocable, and requires no additional approval once invoked. Silence. Movement, no defense. Just the soft rustle of paper and the sound of Chase Donnelly's career bleeding out onto the boardroom floor. The same silver-haired director from before whispered, mostly to himself but loud enough for all to hear, "You never read the merger files." Chase didn't blink, didn't breathe. And then it hit him, not just that I was right, but that I'd been waiting. That I'd designed this safety net long before he even knew what company letterhead looked like. That this wasn't a lucky escape. It was an engineered detonation, Years in the making, precision-timed and pressure-sealed. A trap only he was dumb enough to walk into wearing tap shoes. He turned to the board, desperate now, his voice pitched high with false composure. Okay, yes, I didn't catch that clause. But look, it's one client. We can, it's 40% of our revenue, snapped the chair. We can repair the relationship. I'll call Vanderstraw. I've already signed new representation. You lost them, Chase. Permanently, said another board member, eyes cold. He went quiet, and then in a last-ditch effort tried to pivot. This was sabotage, he said, waving vaguely toward me. She set us up. She manipulated, the chair didn't raise her voice. Didn't need to. Chase, she said, cutting clean through his spiral, please step out. We'll reconvene after closed discussion. He stared at her. No, this isn't. This is my firm. You're excused, she repeated, calm as a razor. He laughed. That nervous, unglued kind of laugh that makes your skin crawl. I'm not going anywhere. And that's when she nodded to the assistant near the door. Security arrived within 30 seconds. 2 men in dark polos and earpieces. Polite. Firm, Mr. Donnelly, you need to leave the room. He refused, arms crossed, jaw clenched, sweating now. This is a joke. She's bluffing. You're all just Chase, the chair said. One last time, don't make this worse than it already is. That broke him. He threw the contract across the table, petulant, loud, completely powerless. Then he stormed out, shoved the door so hard it bounced off the wall. Silence followed, a long, heavy silence as if the air itself was processing what just happened. I stood slowly, collected the folder. David gave a polite nod to the board, who still couldn't look me in the eye. At the threshold, I turned back once. No drama, no monologue, just the truth wrapped in steel. Loyalty is only worthless when you give it to the wrong people. Then I walked out. The room behind me exploded, voices rising, blame ricocheting off the walls like a pinball machine in hell. Chairs scraped, papers shuffled, someone cursed. The chair barked for order, but I didn't look back. Outside, the hallway was warm with morning light. My phone buzzed again, another recruiter. Another invitation, another door opening while theirs slammed shut. I stepped into the elevator alone. No fanfare, no applause, just power. Quiet, earned, irreversible power. Thanks for joining the fun, you office survivors. Subscribe for more switch-flicking drama. Let's make your former coworkers sweat.